We're
Okay.
on.
We're just
All
chatting.
right. Holly and I are just sitting here being awed by all the people who are behind the scenes to make this work.
Y'all are awesome.
William and Olivia and John and Tim. And without them, this would not be.
Yeah.
This would not be.
We're at least making them laugh right now because we just sit here and look pretty, and they plug things in and try sound and drop things. We're good. We're great.
So I want to thank you for being
Yeah.
out there, and I'm glad that you are joining Holly, Hudley, and me today for this version of Ordinary Life. And I want to say right off the bat that no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome to join us here. And we look forward to the day when social distancing does not keep us from meeting face to face. Because we're not meeting face to face, it's really difficult to know what's going on with people who are in the Ordinary Life community or the St. Paul's community. So I have a favor to ask. If you have a need of any kind that is church related, you want us to know about yourself, your neighbor, somebody who may need food, may need transportation, may need some way that we can reach out to them, please call the number on your screen. St. Paul's number 713-528-0527. You'll get kicked into voicemail, but that's fine because we have a staff of pastors here who are really eager and into overdrive in trying to find ways for us to stay connected. So if you check either the Ordinary Life website or the St. Paul's website, you'll find ways that we are creatively trying to have groups come together through using platforms like Zoom and Skype and other things so that we can meet during this time. So we would like to do that. Now here's a mixed message. During the week, Holly and I spent a lot of time talking on the phone about this, and she sent me a poem by Hafiz.
Hafiz. Yes.
That had a line in it that caused me to say, wow, this could give us an opening for our talk next week.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. It's a great poem.
And the title of the talk is going to be?
My nose is bigger than yours.
We have to sit in
Do we have to
profile
sit
and
in
let
profile?
people
Probably
see.
mine is
My
bigger.
nose is bigger than yours. It's a poem by Hafiz. I love his poetry, and I had not seen that.
Yeah, he's quite funny. He's a funny mystic.
So we don't have to do that. I think that the poem centers around something that's really critical for this time, and that's how we look at each other and how we begin to see each other. But before that poem had found Holly, I had come up with the idea that maybe we could do a class, a conversation between the two of us, where you could submit things, and I'll tell you about how to do that in a minute, and the class would be questions we would like for Holly to ask Bill, or questions we would like for Bill to ask Holly, or topics we wish the two of you would address.
Yes.
And we could have some spontaneity with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, last week we did ask for your feedback, and we got it while we were talking, and most of the text said that you couldn't see the slides. I think we fixed that today.
We hope so.
We hope so.
Yeah.
And we're working on even a better fix going forward. But if this idea appeals to you, one of the ways that you can get in touch with us is that you can send an email through the Ordinary Life website. I experimented with this twice in the last 72 hours.
Sending yourself an email?
I sent myself an
Great.
email through the Ordinary Life website, and I gave it a very creative title called Test.
Gosh, I've never heard of that before.
And then, and that was the content of it too.
Mm-hmm.
I got the email in 5 seconds.
Great.
So it works. So if the place where you're logged on right now, I think it's contact us is in the upper right-hand corner. I could be wrong about that. Or you could just send a text to me at this number, 713-594-9180, and we'll try to pay attention to it today. We both have our phones out to see if that happens. And by the way, did I tell you that we checked the analytics of last week and there were almost 300 devices hooked up to this at that time?
I think that's pretty cool. It's bigger than our class
Bigger
can even
physically
hold.
than our class.
So.
And we have people who watch from different places.
Yeah.
Holly's cell phone is 832-314-0680. So, questions that you would like me to ask her, questions you would like her to ask me, questions you would like, or topics you would like the two of us to discuss together during this time, or at any time, for that matter. Yeah. So, gosh, how rapidly things have unfolded in the last couple of weeks. When we started this, when we came to church last Sunday, the anticipation was we would be not holding face-to-face meetings for 2 weeks.
Right. And now it's 6 to 8.
Now it's at least 8, maybe longer. We're going past Easter. I have been connected to the St. Paul's community for 30 years. And only one time that I can remember did we not have a physical meeting here on a Sunday, and that was during Harvey.
Gosh.
Even when Allison, some of you might remember Allison, the huge rainstorm that swept through the city came, we still had a meeting, one here, because the sanctuary building was flooded, but we don't know what we're in for. And we're going to keep doing this and have ways. Some of you who are on the Ordinary Life listserv, meaning that you get the previews and summaries, you notice that I have ramped up the number of contacts that I'm trying to have with you during this time. I hope it's not irritating. If it is, let me know and I will back off from doing that. But I do want us to stay in touch. And I'll only send you things that I think are useful.
Yeah.
So as for today, last Sunday night, not knowing where we were heading, but getting clear that this is going to be longer,
Yes.
I got into bed. My routine is to read before I go to sleep. Right now I'm reading the third in the Ken Follett books.
Oh, of the Middle Ages trilogy, the Pillars of the Earth.
Right now.
Perfect one for right now. It's all about the plague.
Well, the first one is really about the plague.
Yeah.
And the third one is about burning people at the stake.
That's when they figured out, actually some nuns figured out that washing your hands is what prevents the spread of disease.
And wearing a face mask.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with somebody who's sick.
But they didn't have running water then, so the idea of washing your hands was not.
Have you read those books?
I've read all 3 of them, yeah.
They're good.
They are. Yeah, he's a good, captivating writer, yeah.
Right. So anyway, as I was getting into bed, I have on my iPad, my iPhone, and this app that I've mentioned to you before called We Croak, which at 5 random times during the day sends you a little reminder that pops up on your screen and says, remember, you are going to die. And one of the things we're going to talk about today in this talk is fear. And we're all going to die. And if you're afraid of death, that's really a bad fear to have. So we'd like to get rid of that.
In the next 45 minutes, we will get rid of your fear of death.
I'm optimistic.
Right.
So along with the announcement that you're going to die that comes at 5 random times a day, there is a quote. And some of them are more telling than others. But this is the one that I read last Sunday night. It's by Stephen King, and it says, the world has teeth, and it can bite you anytime it wants. And we're being bitten right now by the plague.
I mean, that's one way to look at it, that it's an act of aggression by the world, but it also is just an act of evolution.
So I came up with the title, and then Holly helped modify it for today's talk about how not to go to berserk when things fall apart. This raises an interesting philosophical question, which is, do things fall apart?
Right.
Do they?
I think that one of the worst things you can say to someone when they're stressed or anxious is don't stress.
Just calm down.
Just calm down.
That's
right.
never said to anybody at a time when they can do it.
That's right. That's right. So I think there are people in the world right now who do feel like things are falling apart because their routine is disrupted. Their ways of operating in the world are completely altered. There are some who are like, yay, we get to stay home for as long as the foreseeable future allows, and that may not feel like falling apart. My thought on falling apart is that things, you fall apart, but you fall back together too, you know? So things get undone and redone and undone and redone, and that's also true in the cosmos, right? Things fall apart, they rejoin, they become something else.
So I was thinking this morning that what we're talking about is obviously grounded in, I hope, good scholarship and science.
Yes.
And obviously it has psychological foundations, and obviously it has good theological foundations. But really, to benefit from what we are talking about right now is an experiential thing.
Yes, yeah.
And so I'm so sorry I've never brought this up before in here, but people who have a daily spiritual practice begin to get it that things, what you experience in the meditation practice is things come into being and they pass away.
Yes.
And they come into being and they pass away. Just like the rhythm of day and night, or breathing in and breathing out, or anything, sunrise and sunset, nothing lasts.
Right.
And you can't get into the future, you can't hold on to the past. So in a way, things don't fall apart because things never were in place.
Right.
The word disaster is a word that has a root meaning that we're out of alignment with the stars.
That's so beautiful. We are a bit out of alignment with the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's an equation to be said that we have this overdependence on kind of chemicalization, on certain materials, and that depletes the earth, which depletes us, which depletes our immune system. So, you know, things work cyclically, right? So to be in alignment with the stars. A friend of mine sent me a poem about that last night, actually, about hearing the stars sing. It's beautiful. Maybe I'll bring it next week, but it is, can we hear the stars sing? And if we can still hear the stars sing, that indicates some level of connectivity with the earth, with each other, with just really tuning in.
One of the things that happens to people, to all of us, is that we get in this cycle of thinking, if only then, if only so-and-so, then we wouldn't be in this condition.
Right.
And first of all, we are in this condition. And the best thing we can do is accept that and to embrace that reality. And I've had a number of people send me a TED talk that Bill Gates did a number of years ago, predicting the pandemic that's coming. I've had even more people send me information about the fact that there was modeling done about this very virus within the last
3 months before
90 days that was not heeded. And I have heard cooler heads say, now is not the time for blame.
Right.
Now is the time for compassion and for looking out for each other and to come together in ways that this polarized country has not been able to come together in the last number of years.
And I would even expand that to the world. I mean, the world is sort of dealing with this in the same moment. And the reason we know that the world is because we have the capacity to use technology to connect with the rest of the world.
Have you seen what's going on in Barcelona?
Literally in real time, or is it a movie?
No, it's literally what's going on in real time.
Tell me.
At 8 o'clock at night, all the people in Barcelona get out on their balconies because they're under severe lockdown, and they bang pots and blow musical instruments and shout thanksgiving and support for their medical
That's
professionals.
lovely.
A
Yeah.
whole city doing that together,
That's
coming
great.
together.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are moments of beauty for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, there's one of the areas that I've been trained in and practiced for a little bit was in holistic health, and there's a strong correlation between the how we internalize and process stress and our overall well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And it is certain that almost all dis-ease, so disease, dis-ease, can be connected with how our body deals with stress, whether that's an internal stress, a foreign invader like a bacteria or a virus, or how we deal with external stressors that happen in our lives. And I mean, again, it really does point to the importance of having that daily spiritual practice to learn how to become more equanimous, is that a word, in moments of stress.
That is one of the
Yeah.
4 immeasurables.
That's right. We haven't gotten there yet, though.
And to be to live at peace with what is. About, I'm going to say 6 or 7 months ago. Let's say 6 months ago. After teaching class in here, I evidently said something about how we were not dealing with ecological issues in a good way, that we were not taking care of the earth or ourselves. And after the third worship service, I was at my doors greeting people, shaking hands, doing unhealthy things now, we know. And one of the guys who'd been here in ordinary life said to me, you don't have to worry about the earth. The earth's going to take care of itself. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, probably in the not too distant future, we're going to suffer from a pandemic. And it made me think of what my friend Joseph Rochelle, some of you may remember Joseph, Buddhist friend of mine who now lives in Austin. I asked him once in a conversation, what do you think about the future of the earth? What I meant was, what do you think about our future? What's our future? And Joseph said, the earth is going to be fine. The earth is like a wet dog. You know how a dog gets wet? And then a dog shakes itself like that to get the water off? That's what the earth is doing, or can do. And if we plunder the earth, if we don't take care of her, then she didn't take care of herself. She's been around for a long time.
4 billion years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the exercises that Joanna Macy says to do in her book, Active Hope, is write a letter from the earth to you as if she were your mother.
Yeah.
And what would the earth say to us about how we are treating her?
William, shame on you. That's what she would say.
Well, if it were my mother, she would also say, be sweet.
That's right, be sweet. That's right. You know what I was thinking about, we both have an affinity for James Finley. You've actually spent time with him, and I've just listened to him. But he talks about the practice of return, that in our spiritual practice, the idea of watching our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions go by like leaves on a river, right? And just kind of watching them float by. That takes time, practice, and effort to learn how to do that without wanting to grab out and reach for every leaf that floats by. But he says, the number of times you get distracted is also the number of times you get to return. To return to source, to return to the moment. And I've been thinking about, and I was talking to you about this man, Jarvis Masters, on death row in San Quentin prison. We can skip. And he's a death row inmate at San Quentin prison in California. And at 19, he was arrested for armed robbery and placed in jail for something like 10 to 15 years. But in the time that he was in jail, in the first couple of years, a guard was murdered. And he was accused as being one of the masterminds of this murder, although it was proven that he did not commit it. It was not even proven that he helped mastermind it. Nevertheless, he was placed on death row. He was the only person among the 5 to 7 who were thought to be involved that was placed on death row, and he didn't even commit the murder. Like, they found that out, that he did not commit it. It's a really compelling story by itself, but he lives for 30 years in a 4.5 foot by 10.5 foot cell. And at some point during his death row sentencing, he began to read about Buddhism. And he kind of swallowed it. He really just engulfed it. And he's, I think, the only prisoner to have a teacher, a Buddhist teacher, come give him the Buddhist sacraments. And so was kind of given that, I don't know what it's called, he's not a priest, but he was given the sacraments to kind of become a Buddhist officially, right? And his teacher at that time was Rinpoche. You know who that is? And now his teacher is Pema Chodron, who visits him at least 2 times a year on death row to work with him, to meditate with him, to ask him about his practice. And, you know, I'm just thinking, if he can find equanimity, I'm sure not every day is easy. Reading his book, which I have, it's obvious that not every day is easy, but if he can do a daily practice, find equanimity, and find purpose in a 4.5 by 10.5 foot cell, I figured I can give it a shot in my house for the next 6 to 8 weeks.
You know, just in the interest of full disclosure, our title today is about how not to go to berserk when things fall apart.
Right.
When Things Fall Apart is the title of one of Pema Chodron's
That's right.
books.
That's why I thought it was kind of cool, a nice synchronicity that she's his teacher.
Yeah, I frequently quote my connection to Carl Jung saying that the way out of our dilemma is to find a spiritual solution.
Yes, yeah.
I would say that in different ways. At the moment, I would say the way out of our dilemma is connect with our true selves, and then we're okay.
Well, one of the things that led me to this degree that I'm doing right now is just this interest in thinking that our evolution is really about consciousness, morality, and spirituality. That, I think, is that's what I really intuit, that our next great evolution has to be more of an internal.
So this is, would you say then that our purpose here is to fulfill our destiny as being consciousness, able to reflect on itself, able to reflect on the well-being of our earth?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that consciousness, this is going to bring up we are so off our notes right now, but that's great. One of the things that we talked about was this idea of preeminence versus immanence, right? And in my thought, things are kind of co-evolving. There's a co-evolution happening between our notions of God, our notions of consciousness, our notions of expansion. And I really think that those things are happening together. So as we become conscious and reflect on the cosmos, however much we can, it too is experiencing consciousness. So there's this like mutuality in experience and experiencing consciousness.
Now, we've had some conversations about personification.
We sure have. Are we going there now?
Well, I don't want to get away from what we've prepared.
Right.
But, so is it within the realm of reason to say, I know this is not accurate, but I'm speaking metaphorically, that the earth thought, I need consciousness to evolve so that conscious creatures can take better care of me. Is that possible?
Well, there's mutuality in that, right? This idea that that they both need each other, right? I don't necessarily think the earth needs us. I do think we need the earth. And so as long as we're here, then it does become our duty to take better care. As you said, the earth can shake off like a dog shaking fleas,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we can't shake the earth off. We're the fleas.
Yeah, we are the fleas. But we're very narcissistic and egocentric, and we
Yeah.
think the show's all about us.
Yeah, we do.
So let's talk about the fact that people are so afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say one more thing about Jarvis Masters is that he wrote this beautiful poem that reflects the experience of being sentenced to death. And the poem goes back and forth between creating what is called prison pruno, or prison wine, out of mashed up fruits and sugar and letting it ferment under your bunk, and being sentenced to death. So he's simultaneously grappling with death and also creativity, creating something, making something.
I will put that recipe in the summary that goes out.
If liquor stores close, here's what you can do.
Well, it's not the recipe, it is the incredible creativity of this guy
Yeah.
who takes the literal transcript of his being sentenced to death, and every other line puts this recipe for hooch.
Right. Right.
We're
We're going to start hanging white flags outside of our house.
The juxtaposition is just absolutely
It's
jarring.
gorgeous. Yeah. Should I read it? Or we'll move on. We'll put it in the summary.
I think we better
Yeah.
better move
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
because I want to talk about fear.
Yeah.
Bertrand Russell has a great line about fear. Fear is the main source of superstition, and one of the main sources of cruelty. Hoarding is cruel to other people. To conquer fear is the beginning of wisdom. And the way that you conquer fear from the standpoint of the spirituality that we try to teach in here, is to look at it deeply and see the source of it. There's really nothing to be afraid of in the present moment. And what we'll talk about next week, this popped in my mind, is that when we turn light on things, then there's no reason to be afraid. Right? I thought of the fact while we were getting ready to work on this, there are people who are terrified.
Yes.
Right now, there are people who are terrified. And I'm not minimizing that, and I'm not saying I don't understand that. And I get anxious about what's happening because we don't know. We don't know how long this is going to last. We just don't know. And there's so many voices out there that are saying, not only is it bad, but it's going to get worse. That's why people are locking down states and cities and that sort of thing, as they say, to flatten out the curve so that medical facilities don't get overwhelmed. We just don't know what's going to happen. And we're going to be okay. We have to hold on to that particular thing. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, one of the most frequent phrases you hear in the Jewish tradition and from the teachings of Jesus is fear not, do not be afraid. I am with you, there is nothing to fear. That didn't mean that people didn't suffer. That didn't mean that people didn't have difficulties and disappointments. But it did mean that there was nothing to fear. And I think about the fact that people have lives full of complaints now, can't get enough toilet paper, can't get enough hand sanitizer, can't get enough of this. When I think of somebody like Mother Teresa, who has seen more suffering in a week, I know she's dead now, but she saw more suffering in a week that most of us see in our lifetime.
Right, yeah.
I think about Nelson Mandela, who for almost 3 decades
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, at least.
was in this prison cell and came out not embittered at all. I'm reading a new book to me, a new
Yeah.
book on Jesus. And I just finished this morning reading a chapter on the crucifixion by this Buddhist mystic who writes about Jesus. And, you know, if I identify with Jesus, I don't want to be crucified for sure. But if I did have that experience and I came back, you know, I'd be looking out to get somebody.
Yeah.
I'd want to get even with whoever did this to me and just knock the daylights out of them. But you don't see that on the part of these people who know that they're connected to self and they've nothing to fear.
Right. And just to kind of go back to the watching the leaves on the river, it's not to say that Mandela or Jesus didn't have resentment or bitterness. And remember Jesus' plea, why have you forsaken me? There's extreme grief in that. But the ability to hold that and kind of move on nevertheless, to not be operated by fear, that's what's remarkable. I mean, we're talking about some really evolved people here, Mandela and Jesus. So I'm wondering
And
how
Mother
ordinary,
Teresa,
and Mother Teresa.
who also went for a long time
Yeah.
questioning her faith. And she took a lot of hits for that. But the fact is that whatever her belief was, it didn't impede her from getting up every day and
Right.
dealing with the suffering people of Calcutta.
And we think about, even in Jesus' life, who we only really know about the last 3 years, it took time to develop whatever spirit, soul, practice he developed to be able to walk into the last 3 years of his life that we really read about in the Bible.
And
you
if
know?
anybody wants to know about how that happened,
Yeah.
I think one of the most credible, and it's historical fiction because nobody knows, but Bruce Chilton's book on Rabbi Jesus is the best thing I've ever read on how Jesus left home probably around the age of 12 or 13 and spent those intervening years before his, quote, public ministry to become the spiritual person that he
Right.
was.
Right.
It was not an easy road
I
for
can't
him.
imagine.
And I would also like to point out that during this time when we were talking about a lot of people being frightened, a lot of people have produced incredible, beautiful stuff. Sherry and I left the house the other day to walk our dog. And as we were exiting the house, this guy walked in front of our house. I've never seen him. Not somebody I would recognize from the neighborhood, just I'd say a guy in his mid-50s, just walking around. He stopped and looked at us and said, "Hey folks, do you need anything? Can I go get you something?" There are people who are like that. I've had phone calls from people who are saying, "How are you? Do you need anything? Do you need me to go to the store for you?" And
Yeah.
I've just said toilet paper.
That's right. Tenderness comes out also
Yeah.
in moments of fear. And that's kind of, we do have a choice about what we lean on.
So a ton of people have sent me some really wonderful things. I want to read one.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's a very beautiful prayer. May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no options. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those that have no place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in for a quarantine at home remember those who have no home. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us find ways to be in the loving embrace of God to our neighbors. We ask through Christ the healer. I think it's a beautiful prayer.
It's beautiful.
And you might think about that, your own acts of generosity in this time. If you pay for a personal service, like for example, a personal trainer or have favorite waitstaff or whatever, and you're not able to go now because of the lockdown, keep paying them because they're at the margins, they're at the edge.
People who rely on contract or hourly wages.
You had a story
Yeah.
about a guy who...
Yeah, but there was a story about a guy who went to Irma's Mexican restaurant downtown, and he, I don't know how much food he bought, but he bought food and picked it up to go and left a $10,000 tip to cover the waitstaff for at least that week. And I just, that's beautiful. Not all of us have $10,000 in our pocket, but we may have an extra dollar, right? And the wait staff, the people who wash dishes, the people who prepare food, this is part of our kind of entertainment industry. People we rely on for things that we normally do, where we go and break bread together. There's always a number of people working in behind the scenes on that, and those are the people that I think are most at the margins, who works hourly and low wage jobs. Yeah.
I think that even though there's no way to predict how long this shutdown will last, if you want to call it that, these extreme measures, I think, and we will get to the other side of this, that's going to happen. And we have no way to imagine what that looks like. But we have an opportunity here to create a better, more just, equitable society.
We have some time to think about it.
We have some time to think about things. I will be 83, my next birthday.
I know.
And I am either blessed or cursed with an, for the most part, excellent memory. I can remember things from when I was 2.
Yeah.
So I remember the Sunday afternoon when people were gathered around their big old console radios that were, now we know they didn't need to be this big, but they were big wooden things that sat in the living room. And we listened to the aftermath of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And we listened to the president's fireside chats to calm people, we've nothing to fear but fear itself, kind of thing. And I remember how we came together as a society that was cooperative and kind in our desire to defeat this enemy. Oh, we have a different kind of enemy now, and it's this illness. We need to figure out ways to help each other get on the other side of it.
And I think it is important to actually not personify the virus and to say this is happening as a result of something else. What are the awarenesses we need to build so that pandemics don't continue to happen, right? What is our awareness about the environment? What is our awareness about our dependence on chemicals? What is our awareness about our own immunity that we need to build so that this doesn't continue? That's, to me, it's an opportunity for awareness.
How do we personify the virus?
We need to fight this virus, right? We need to fight this enemy. An enemy is an other, right? I'm wondering if we can take a stance of curiosity. Like, what is this telling us about?
Not to eat bats.
Right, stop eating bats. That's
that
right.
Could be,
yeah.
That could be
Could
something.
be it. That could be it.
Well, the way that we do exploit our resources and live in such a mindless way at times, we get consequences from that. So back to the issue of fear. I have done some training with the man who owns the market on anxiety disorders in the United States. His name is Dr. David Burns. He is now Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at Stanford. And Dr. Burns, you can look this up on the internet. We didn't bring this. He came up with a list of things he calls cognitive distortions. And a cognitive distortion is a thought that you have that leads to your being frightened. And the distortion is something that's simply not true. And a distorted thought is things will always be the way they are, or I will starve to death, or whatever. You have no evidence of that. So get on the internet and look up Dr. David Burns' cognitive distortions. They can be very helpful in calming things down.
Yeah.
And there's also a teaching attributed to the Buddha. We don't know for sure, but it's one that I keep close at hand. The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. Whether Buddha wrote that or not, it's beautiful and helpful.
Yeah, thoughts become things, is that simply put, but yeah.
You know, Jesus taught the same thing.
Yeah.
Can you add a day to your life by worrying about it?
Usually we can take it away.
Can you make yourself 3 inches taller? So.
Right, that's right, yeah.
So the spiritual work that we have to do is to connect with the self, and this goes all the way back into the very earliest days of all the living religions. The self is another word for God.
Mm-hmm.
And Meister Eckhart, the mystic that I quote a lot, says that when we lose contact with the self, in the way that Eckhart meant the self, we lose to that degree contact with God.
Yes.
So hanging on to our identity that we are who we are in God, no more, no less, is another way to have the anxiety lessen and the assurance that things will be okay.
Yeah. I love this also from Meister Eckhart. He wrote once, "If I spent enough time with the tiniest creature, even a caterpillar, I would never have to prepare another sermon. So full of God is every creature." And this is, again, talking about kind of what is begging for our attention right now, what is begging for us to pay attention to it. Something as simple as a caterpillar, right? The caterpillars aren't in quarantine. The bugs aren't in quarantine. The flowers aren't in quarantine. The night sky isn't in quarantine. It's cloudy, but these things are also, I think, begging for our attention. And one of the things we've been doing with the boys, or we did last week, was do little nature walks, just to notice what's going on around you. Just noticing the rain, the sound of the rain, or the slight chill of the air last night, the silence. I walked my dog last night, and it was so quiet. I live about 7 blocks off of I-10, and normally you just hear constant droning of engines. It was so quiet last night. It was lovely. I'm wondering if we'll maybe mandate, like, every 1 day a week needs to be just a shutdown. Just go and listen. That'd be nice.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, some of us have personality types on the Enneagram that don't mind being shut down, closed off, away, like 5s. And now you're a 6.
I'm a 6, yeah. I actually don't feel very fearful. I feel careful, but I don't feel fearful. And fear is the driver of the 6. So it must mean I'm evolving. In this moment, I am evolving.
We'll hang on to that.
Yeah, I'll let you know in 2 weeks how I'm doing with homeschooling my children.
So,
Yeah.
just be quiet, be still. I love that line, and I first heard Jim Finley do this. By the way, you were suggesting that we talk to each other about things that have brought us joy in this time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if this is too technical to talk about, but I have a TV that's supposed to be a smart TV. I'm not sure how smart it is, but I connected my Apple TV to it, which took me about an hour to do because I kept entering the password and it says wrong. And I got warned by my son, don't enter the wrong password too often or they'll shut you down. I couldn't find the password for things. But I finally found the right password. I connected my Apple TV, and on the Apple TV, you got all these options of things you can go to. One of them is YouTube.
Right.
And I thought, you could look up anything on YouTube.
You can.
And so I put, this embarrasses me to say, but
How you
I-
gave over to
I entered
looking
my
up
own
yourself.
name into YouTube, and guess who came up? We did.
Oh, both of us?
Yeah.
Oh.
We came up doing a talk on YouTube from sometime last year.
Oh, wow.
And then I entered Jim Finley into that. And oh my gosh, I got this full plate of all these experiences that I could have with Jim Finley. So we sat there and watched a 50-minute lecture that Finley did at some Catholic church a few years ago. If you've never seen Jim Finley give a talk, he doesn't stand up behind a lectern and speak. He sits down and almost never looks at any notes and just shares himself. And you can there's something so authentic about him and what he has to say, and he's so lighthearted. He's really one of the truly holy people.
Incredible giggle.
He does have a great
He
giggle.
giggles,
And a
and
head of hair that's not right.
Oh, okay,
It's not fair.
Are you speaking of the head of hair that you?
He is my age, and he's got this gorgeous head of dark hair.
Yeah, that's
I
funny.
understand why people like that and symphony conductors
Have great hair.
have great hair.
It must be a job requirement.
It must be.
Yeah, for the symphony conductor. Maybe they wear wigs sometime too if they.
I don't think he wears a wig.
Not Jim Finley. Orchestra conductors.
Oh.
Have you watched the series Beethoven? What is it called? Beethoven in the City?
No,
Is that what it's called?
I don't know.
It's a Netflix series, and it's wonderful. It's about a sort of fictional account of the New York Symphony Orchestra. And the whole thing is about how the new conductor, has hair. They even call him the hair. It's really funny.
Is it a wig?
No, it's his real hair for a minute, and then he chops it off. I'm giving too much away.
Okay,
You need
all
to
right,
watch it. It's
okay.
so delightful. Yeah. Yeah. So we kind of bypassed our idea of what the cosmos is asking us to be. Did you want to talk about that?
Sure, we had a fight about it. So
We had a fight about it. Do you have a low tolerance for disagreement, Bill?
Yeah. I'm conflict averse.
Okay. I don't know what I am.
What I said is that I think the universe is asking something of us now, and you said you didn't believe that.
Yeah. Well, I guess we kind of touched on this, but the analogy you used was, and maybe you can say a little bit more about it, was the bean being planted, that it needs something outside of itself in order to grow, right? And this idea that it cannot grow without the sun, without the rain, without the elements. And I said, well, the elements also need the bean to work their magic.
Yeah, I'm both coming from the perspective of Ilia Delio's talking about Teilhard de Chardin and our being called forth into a future of love. And if you're going to claim that, you have to assume that there is love that's calling us forth.
Right.
And that is a huge assumption that you may not agree with.
I think that's the entanglement part. It's both and. It is both within, and to be revealed needs to be pulled from. So this entanglement that we are in, this lovely dance of needing what is around us to pull forth, to lead out what is within.
So, one of the principles of ordinary life is that we are here to grow. And once we have dealt with the fundamental issues of surviving, how do we define what that growth is? And it's growth into what? For what?
Right.
What are our resources? What is the understanding of why we're here? And it's not just, I can't believe it's just to consume.
No, I don't think so either. There's, again, I think that there's a mutuality in not just consuming. I think when we're blind, when we're sort of unseeing, we are just in a what's in it for me kind of mentality.
So we're going to keep talking about this as we go forward. But we're talking about these, what Karen Armstrong calls the 4 immeasurables of love.
Right.
But she got that from Buddhism.
Yes.
I mean, that comes straight out of Buddhist psychology, Buddhist teaching. And you can then go back. A lot of people have asked, why do I refer to the Buddhist teaching so much? And that's because it's so systematized. It's so organized in a way that Jesus did not organize his teachings at all. People who came after him did, and they put them in some order that more fits the person than the character of Jesus. But these things that Karen Armstrong is talking about, if you read her outstanding book, 12 Steps to a More Compassionate Life, I think that's the title of it.
Yep.
She talks about this time in human history where there was so much violence in the world, all over the world, territorial violence that was born out of the agricultural revolution, right? And people were just killing each other for territory so that they could, I mean, the justification of it was, we need this territory to grow land and to be safe, to grow crops and be safe and all that sort of stuff. And it was during this time that the prophets of Israel and that Buddha and Lao Tse and Confucius and all these people who had no connection with each other, they had no internet to communicate, came up with what I call the evolution of right religion. And right religion is, don't do to somebody what you would not want done to yourself. Right. And then out of that came these immeasurables of love. And one of them is loving kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity or peace.
Right.
Of this 4.
There's some things that have brought me joy this week, these last couple of days in quarantine. One of them actually is, this guy was introduced to me by Lanicia Rouse Tinsley. She's an artist here in Houston. And actually she was just about to have an opening at Project Row Houses in one of the installations, but it got canceled because here we are. And but I keep watching her work on Instagram, and she's creating beautiful things right now. But anyways, she mentioned Ross Gay, the poet, to me once, and he has a book called The Book of Delights, which he for a year wrote just little tiny things that brought him delight during the day and compiled his favorites over the course of a year into this book of tiny essays. And one of them is a good reminder of how we don't know how things are going to turn out, but how we can delight in the moment. So he writes in number 50, Hickories, my friend Michael and I met today to put together the order for the nut grove the city has asked the community orchard to plant and oversee. Hazelnuts, pecans, bwart nuts, which are a mix of heartnut and butternut, hickories. How long until the hickories start making their fruit, I asked Michael. He said, oh, they'll be in full production in about 200 to 250 years. So they're planting something that they don't even get to see the fruits of. You know, they're hoping for something to come. And I really think that's similar to this situation. It's really similar to every moment, but it's heightened right now. We don't know what will come, but what fruits are we planting?
Yeah, I had a professor in graduate school who quoted a line to me, I'm just now recalling, that I don't think was original with him, but he said that a definition of faith and hope is to plant a tree in whose shade you know you will never sit.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous. I mean, and it's an act of hope, right? It's an act of something beyond. And another thing, a friend of mine sent me on.
I hope this works for the people who are watching.
Sent me on St. Patrick's Day. You know that well, two things. A friend of mine that I went to high school with said that she rolled out her harp onto her driveway and just played her harp for people who were walking by. One of our closest friends was passing by the Mucky Duck, and a guy was bagpiping on the roof of the Mucky Duck for anyone who wanted to pass by and listen.
How did you get this in case somebody wants to watch it later?
It's my friend Jaime sent it to me from his phone, and I think it's on his YouTube. I can send a link to it. So, yeah. But these are little moments of joy, I think, that people are spreading right now. Is that volume working, or is it? Okay, sort of.
So you know what would happen if I got my harp out and played it on my driveway?
People would walk away.
Nobody would walk by my house anymore.
So this actually also fostered a whole conversation about how I didn't know that both Irish and Scotsmen wore kilts.
Yeah?
They both do. Depends on your clan. This is actually, speaking of music, another thing that brought me a lot of joy, and this doesn't happen. We've been married almost 14 years. Josh struggled to dance with me on the day we got married. We danced on the porch with some songs the other night. That doesn't happen in our house, and it was really beautiful and fun and funny.
Finding that Jim Finley video is something that brought me an immense amount of joy this week, because I know now that there's a whole wealth of material out there. It's so much richness of things that we have access to.
Yeah.
The fact that we are well, that we're still here, that we get to do this.
Yes.
I can't tell you, I do say it a lot to people here and elsewhere. If you don't do it, the proof is in the pudding. Mm-hmm. Keep a gratitude journal. Write down every day 3 or 4 things that happened the day before that you're grateful for, and keep that handy.
One of the things I think we can be grateful for is fear, because it teaches us to see differently. It teaches us to see what's beneath.
We have about 50 seconds.
I know. We both have poems we want to read too.
If we went over 3 or 4 minutes, would that be the end of the world?
Is anyone rushing off?
Is it okay if I just read this and we skip the rest?
Oh, sure.
You sure?
I mean, yeah, you can have the last word.
You sound like Lawrence O'Donnell. Isn't that the guy who says the last word?
I don't remember. It is pretty cool, though, just before you start, the artists and the poets and the musicians, they continue to create during this time.
And we are also fortunate because we have this immense electronic media that allows us to experience all of this. There's also a lot of fear and nonsense out there that people need to be careful of. I think that it's healthy to limit your intake of what's happening, news updates, to about 10 or 15 minutes a day. Don't watch the news. It's too scary. I mean, I still am going to keep my vow to get a stopwatch and watch sometime when we're watching a program, and I happen to stop, let's say, on some news program, how much content there is compared with how many commercials. Do we get a lot of text?
Oh, no, just checking to make sure.
Okay, we'll check these, and we will. We'll respond. We got to maybe have a better way to do that. There is a Irish poet, Catholic priest, a guy named Richard Hendrick, who wrote a prayer that I would like for us to close with.
Is this the one you're sharing? You want to read that one?
You can read it.
Oh no, I was thinking yours was at the end, the one that has.
It may be.
Read that. That's great. This poem is great. This is actually, I found this via Matt Russell.
You read it.
No.
No, I insist.
We're having a live argument.
I just won too.
Okay, we can read it together. We can do part by part. Lockdown. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is isolation. Yes, there is panic buying. Yes, there is sickness. Yes, there is even death.
But they say that in Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds again. They say that after just a few weeks of quiet, the sky is no longer thick with fumes, but blue and gray and clear.
They say that in the streets of Assisi, people are singing to one another across the empty squares, keeping their windows open so that those who are alone may hear the sounds of family around them.
They say that a hotel in the west of Ireland is offering free meals and delivery to the housebound.
Today, a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number through the neighborhood so that the elders may have someone to call on.
Today, churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples are preparing to welcome and shelter the homeless, the sick, the weary. All over the world, people are slowing down and reflecting. All over the world, people are looking at their neighbors in a new way.
All over the world, people are waking up to a new reality, to how big we really are, to how little control we really have, to what really matters, to love.
So we pray and we remember that yes, there is fear, but there does not have to be hate.
Yes, there is isolation, but there does not have to be loneliness.
Yes, there is panic buying, but there does not have to be meanness.
Yes, there is sickness, but there does not have to be the disease of the soul.
Yes, there is even death, but there can always be a rebirth of love.
Wake to the choices you make as to how to live now. Today, breathe. Listen behind the factory noises of your panic. The birds are singing again.
The sky is clearing, spring is coming, and we are always encompassed by love.
Open the windows of your soul, and though you may not be able to touch across the empty square, sing.
And what we didn't get to in our notes, we will do
Someday.
we'll do next week. We'll respond to what you said as well. Remember, stay well. Reach out and contact us through the cell phone numbers that we gave. They'll be on the website by Tuesday morning. Just call, send an email, whatever. And remember that no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, you need to take care of yourself. Watch your step because you are precious cargo. See you here next Sunday. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're done.